So I have just a few pieces of levity before we get started here. This is a good one you'd never want to have happen to you. Not covered, not good. Okay, so the agenda for today's event is that we're going to do a couple of introductions here. We're going to talk about traveling during the pandemic. We're going to talk about COVID coverage and what that looks like. And we're going to take your questions. Just a couple of pieces of housekeeping here. We're going to try and keep it to 1 hour this session. But it all also depends on your questions. So for questions, what we'd like you to do is to type your questions into the chat so that we can read those and comment on those at the end of the slideshow. So if you want to say something during the middle of the slideshow, just click on the little icon at the bottom in the toolbar that says chat, and just type it in there and send it to everyone. And Pam is going to be watching for those and responding to you and bringing them up so that we can address them at the end of the session. Okay, so we will get started here. So my name is Laurie York, and I'm a senior broker here at MediQuote Insurance Brokers. I worked at a number of different insurance companies before I started at MediQuote in 2005. I can't believe it's been that long, 15 years this summer. But for the 5 years before that, I was working at a travel insurance company. And so had quite a bit of experience in the travel insurance industry myself and in the insurance industry. Pam is also here with me. She's given a wave there. Excellent. She joined MediQuote in 2010, so she's a newbie here. Not really. So she is also a senior broker here at MediQuote, and she is in charge of training new brokers that join MediQuote. And then we have Matt. I think he's behind the scenes today. If he's not, he can give us a wave, but he is our IT and marketing team leader. He joined MediQuote in 2010 as well. And he sends out our newsletters and updates our website. He's going to make sure everything runs smoothly here today. So far, so good. Also, I wanted to mention that we will be recording this session so that we can use it again, just so you know. Okay, so MediQuote Insurance Brokers, in case you don't know, has been providing travel medical insurance as an independent travel insurance brokerage firm since 1994. So we provide our clients with numerous different types of insurance and medical insurance products, including health and dental, student coverage, trip cancellation coverage, expatriate coverage, which not very many people know what that is, but basically if you were going to go to Asia and teach English for a year or longer, you would need expatriate insurance. We sell that as well. So lots of different types of medical travel insurance, but that's all. We can't sell you a home insurance policy or an auto policy or anything like that because we don't specialize in that. We want to specialize in travel medical insurance. Okay, so we'll get right into it here. So the pandemic, so it all started on March 13th of this year. The government travel advisory became into effect. And for any of you that were down south at the time, the government advised you to come home at that time. And so lots of snowbirds did come home at that time. That was now 9 months ago, and the government travel advisory remains in effect for Canadians, which basically means that you can't go across the border in your car, but apparently air travel is permitted during the government travel advisory, and people are flying to all sorts of destinations by air. But for snowbirds, it actually is a bit of a challenge, because if you're relying on your car, driving your car while you're down there, that is an issue if you can't drive it across the border. So that's kind of where we're at right now, since the travel advisory was called. So Air Canada does allow you to fly to all sorts of different places. And this link here does show some of the things that they're doing to incentivize people to fly. So they've got a cleaning, health and safety policy now, so that you can feel safe and secure on their flights. And they also have flexible booking options. So in the past, you know, if you wanted to make a change to a trip that you'd booked, you'd have to pay a fee, sometimes a fairly hefty fee. They're not doing that at this time, because of course they're trying to get more and more people to travel. So you can fly. WestJet is also flying. The screen is a little mixed up there because of the font, I guess, but basically WestJet is offering no charge COVID travel insurance if you book a flight with them. And Air Canada is as well, and Sunwing is as well. So basically, you know, you can have like this picture here says included at no additional cost in all flights and vacation packages. So they're trying to, again, make people feel safe to travel on their airplanes. But when you click on the links and you go to the websites, you can see that there are some pieces of like the fine print, so to speak. You know, trips of 21 or 22 days is all that you can get coverage for. $200,000 maximum for COVID coverage, and they don't offer anything other than COVID coverage, just COVID coverage. But obviously, if you're a snowbird and you're going for longer than that, then that's not going to work for you. And the way that their policies are written, if your trip is longer than the 21 or 22 days, then you can't get coverage at all. So it's not really great for the snowbirds, although it is free if your trip is less than 21 days, as long as you feel that the $200,000 Canadian is enough coverage. We'll get into more of that in a bit here. And right now, WestJet and Air Canada have entered into an agreement with Hawaii. So if you, I believe this link here talks about if you're flying through Calgary, you can get a COVID test before you leave, and then you have to, I think, get another COVID test in Hawaii, and then you don't have to quarantine or anything like that. So that is an interesting thing as well. And then there's those people who are potentially shipping their cars and flying across. So there's been some news articles about that, and how people are shipping their cars and shipping their RVs and flying across with their pets and all sorts of things. So that seems to be an option as well for you if you're interested in that. This article talks about just a loophole where you're not supposed to travel, but yet they're allowing you to travel and go through the border via air, and your cars can be shipped. So here was another interesting article that I found in regards to a phone app. Apparently, that if you travel abroad, this is the phone app that you have to register with, so that they can make sure that you're quarantining, that type of thing. I haven't really looked into that a lot, but it's there for you if you're interested in that. We'll be sharing these slides with you if you're interested later. So, you know, you'll be able to click on some of these clips to get more information later. So once you decide that you want to go somewhere, you need to decide, if you want to have COVID coverage and how much COVID coverage is enough COVID coverage. So I think Matt is going to post a link in the chat, and what we'd like you to do is we'd like you to click on that link and take our poll. So the poll is just a little bit of, it's super simple and quick for you to vote on how much coverage that you think that is enough coverage for COVID. So if you can do that, Matt. I'm going to open up my chat. Okay, so it's in there now. Okay, so I'm going to, while you guys are doing that, I'm going to share my screen. Make sure I click the right button here. There we go. Okay, I hope you guys can see that.
Laurie, it looks like you switched to a different tab.
How's that one?
That looks good.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so some of you have already voted. So we have about 37% of you think $1 million is enough COVID coverage. 47% think 2 million is enough. No one voted for 0, although we are selling policies where people say, I don't care, I don't need COVID coverage, I'm good. So that is interesting, but I guess those people aren't on today's call. And then we've got a couple, 11% have 500,000 as enough coverage, and then we've got a couple of people, 5% of you think $5 million is enough. So that is interesting to see the different things here that you want in terms of coverage there. Okay,
Laurie, so Marilyn Tom is wondering if the limit might depend, the best limit might depend on where you travel.
Yeah, that's probably a good point. The US is a popular destination. Coverage is very expensive in the US. Probably more expensive than maybe any other country in the world. But it's also the closest country. So if you had to be emergency evacuated back to Canada, that's the closest place to be evacuated from. And then there's also the issue of, like, if you were going somewhere farther away and needed to be emergency evacuated back to Canada, then that cost could be more expensive. So yeah, you just, it's different for everybody, it seems. We feel that $1 million of coverage is good, but 2 million or more is probably better. And we do offer coverage for those levels in terms of offering COVID coverage. So we're going to go into some of that shortly. So that's a great question, Marilyn. Thank you.
Kathy's wondering how they can get home if they're sick. They're heard that they can't get a medevac back to Canada if you have COVID.
Yeah, well, that is a great question as well. Later on in the presentation, I talk about how unprecedented these times are. And that just goes to that point where, it's hard to know what insurance companies would do or not. Obviously, they can't evacuate you back to Canada if you're not stable enough to travel. There is such a thing as a quarantine chamber, though. There are some air ambulances that have quarantine chambers. I think you probably can't be scared of small places, though, claustrophobic or anything like that, because I think they might be a little bit on the claustrophobic side. But that would probably be the only way that you'd be able to get back. Any more questions there, Pam?
No.
Okay. So the next question is, how much will it cost? what we find, and this is pretty much an answer that we would give you every year when you buy your travel insurance, that travel insurance goes up every year in relation to the US medical inflation rate. So whatever the medical inflation rate, and they actually have a specific US medical inflation rate that's outside of just the regular inflation because it can go up more than regular inflation. And it often is very dependent on that. But also, you know, it could be more than last year because you could move up to the next age bracket from where you were last year, or you could have had a worsening of your health since last year, which could drive up your price. Plus, we find that COVID coverage is anywhere from 10% surcharge on your policy. And then it, you know, it could be more than that depending on the coverage that you're getting. So it can be more than what you expect. And different insurance companies have different pricing models, so it's hard to give ballpark figures on that.
Cheryl's wondering if they have coverage, are they guaranteed to get into a hospital?
Guaranteed to get into a hospital. I don't know that there's any guarantees anymore. You know, the world as we know it is a different place than it was a year ago. So I don't think that there's any guarantees. And, you know, one thing about the whole, you know, unprecedented nature of this is that, you know, if the hospital that is closest to you in the US is full, you know, I'm not sure what they do. I'm not sure if they keep looking around to find the next hospital that's not full, or, you know, what would happen in that situation. And it's just such an unprecedented event that there's not really a good answer to that, or at least there's not an honest answer to that. We could probably go into some answer that may or may not be true, but or correct, but there certainly isn't a good tried and true answer for that type of thing. Okay. So I just thought I'd share some of the frequently asked questions that we get in regards to COVID coverage. So we've been selling COVID coverage for a couple of months now, and so we've sold a fair bit of it to people who are traveling. And so we're going to talk about some of that right now. So the first question is people who ask, like, I already have an annual plan that I paid for months ago that doesn't expire for a few months. Can I use that plan? And the answer to that is that you have to really check your exclusion in your policy in order to know what type of wording and what type of coverage it provides during a Canadian travel advisory, Canadian government travel advisory. So that's the important part for you to look at in your policy. It'll be in the exclusion section of your policy. It's usually near the end of the exclusion section. It's one of the exclusions that in the past wasn't very, I mean, it was in there, but it wasn't very much used or called upon. So this is the first type of exclusion that some of your policies, if you have an existing annual plan, would have. So I'll read it. We'll read it together and then we'll go through it here. So your travel to a country, region, or city for which the Canadian government has issued an official travel advisory to avoid all travel or avoid all non-essential travel regarding the country, region, or city of your destination before your departure date. If the travel advisory is issued after your departure date, this exclusion does not apply to claims for an emergency or medical condition unrelated to the travel advisory. Well, that first sentence right off the bat, or sorry, the last sentence rather, we can just take that right off because the travel advisory has already in effect. It was issued before. If you're departing in the future, whether it's tomorrow or next week or in 2 months, the advisory is issued before your departure date. So basically everything and anything would not be covered with this type of a travel, this type of exclusion. Because the travel advisory has been issued basically for everywhere outside of Canada right now. So if your policy has that type of an exclusion, then it basically is not good to travel on until the travel advisory is lifted. Okay, so the second type of exclusion is worded like this one. So we'll read it together here. Any act of terrorism or any medical condition you suffer or contract when an official travel advisory issued by the Canadian government states, avoid all non-essential travel or avoid all travel regarding the country, region, or city of your destination before your effective date. To view the travel advisories, visit the Government of Canada travel site. This exclusion does not apply to claims for an emergency or a medical condition unrelated to the travel advisory. So in this exclusion, it's basically saying that it doesn't matter whether the advisory was called before your departure or after your departure. This exclusion does not apply to claims for an emergency or a medical condition unrelated to the travel advisory. So if you fell and broke your ankle, if you had a heart attack, that would be covered on this policy, even if there is a travel advisory in effect. But this is still not going to give you coverage for COVID, which is the reason for the travel advisory. So this exclusion does not apply to claims for an emergency or a medical condition unrelated to the travel advisory, but it definitely would apply if it was related to the travel advisory. So this type of an exclusion, you can still travel on this annual plan, but you wouldn't have coverage for COVID.
Cliff is asking, Laurie, can we enter the health system for any sickness and be covered, or do we have to provide a credit card to gain service? I'm assuming he's asking that if they go to a hospital, will they be asked for a credit card prior to being allowed health care?
That's a good question. So basically, you know, the medical field in the US is not regulated by the government. It's not regulated by anyone. So any provider, any urgent care clinic, any hospital, whoever, like whatever place that you're going to seek treatment for an emergency, they basically are allowed to do whatever that they want to do. So if they want you to put your credit card on the desk so that they can charge your credit card, they can basically do that. But by calling the insurance company and letting them know that you're having an emergency, and they will ask you what urgent care clinic or what emergency room you are at, or they can even suggest which urgent care clinic or emergency room you should go to. Because that way, what they do is they contact that urgent care clinic or that emergency room and try to set up like a regular pay provider type relationship so that you don't have to put your credit cards down. We always suggest that you, if at all you can, don't put your credit card out, because then you're going to be dealing with getting reimbursed by the insurance company rather than the hospital having to worry about that. So if you call the insurance company before you go to any emergency room or urgent care clinic, they can guide you to the place that will, you know, take their provision of payment. So that's a great question.
And Daniel was asking about shipping their car across the border and driving it back without any issues.
Yeah, so I don't know of anyone who's actually driven back yet, but we're hearing in the news and stuff like that of lots of people who are shipping their cars. And I've also heard in the news that they can't or won't disallow a Canadian from coming back into Canada. So given that, that's where you're seeing that border loophole type of headline, because basically, if you can get out, they have to let you back in. I haven't tried it myself. I've been working, so I haven't been away anywhere, but this is what we're hearing. And I've actually spoken to clients who are shipping their car and flying down, and we're hearing lots of stories. I've even talked to some shipping companies, and they are shipping lots of cars down there. So I know what's happening. We actually have some information If you want to have information about car shipping, we can provide that to you. We don't know anything about it ourselves. You have to contact them if you're interested in shipping your car, but it sounds like there's lots of people doing it, and it sounds like it works.
We just had one of our attendees indicate they drove home on the May long weekend and didn't experience any difficulties.
Oh, perfect. That's great. Thank you for the feedback there. Okay, I just wanted to give you the website for the Canadian government travel advisories. So with this link, you can actually go to see all of the Canadian global advisories anywhere in the world. It'll say, where Canadians are allowed to travel. So at the moment, the website says to avoid non-essential travel outside of Canada until further notice and avoid all cruise ship travel. So at the moment, that's where we stand, and they've been kind of reviewing that decision every month, and feels like there's not a lot of end in sight for that at the moment, but you never know what the new year will bring. Okay, so a lot of people are just saying, look, I need to buy a policy. What coverage is out there to purchase? So up until about July, there were absolutely no options at all. There was nothing on the market to buy that provided COVID coverage. I guess all the insurance companies were, at the drawing board trying to figure that out. In July, we got a couple of options. In September, we got some more options that became available. So finally, we had something to sell, and then by October, we had 4 options that cover COVID benefits. But not all are created equally. Some companies are offering lower benefits and more limited benefits than others. And so we're going to share with you some of what we've seen in the market so far, so that you can make an informed decision. So the Hyundai version. So this is, when I was a kid, if you had a Hyundai, you had a real beater car. It's the lowest amount of coverage in terms of COVID if you were getting the low version. So basically, there's no, in this type of a policy, there would be no exclusion for COVID, which means they will cover COVID because they're not going to exclude COVID. But it's the most basic type of coverage in that there's no additional COVID features. And often it would be the full policy maximum because they're just not excluding it. So they're treating it like any other medical condition. So nothing bad about this, but again, there's no additional COVID benefits that are kind of the nice to have stuff. And just because it's the low level coverage doesn't necessarily mean it's the cheapest either, as you'll see when you start looking around for quotes and whatnot. The Chevrolet version is kind of the middle of the road. It's not the Cadillac version, but it's not the basic version, where there could be a COVID endorsement or a pandemic endorsement, specifically allowing coverage for anything related to COVID. So it'll outline what the coverages are. There's usually a few extra perks included in this type of coverage, and possibly a limited maximum from the policy maximum, but that would all be outlined specifically so you know what you're buying. And then there's the Cadillac version. So the Cadillac version that we've found is a very good policy. It's a $5 million coverage. You don't have to worry about a 10-day limit to get home. If the government tells Canadians that they need to rush home, you wouldn't necessarily have to, because your coverage is going to remain in effect, even though that might be happening. There would be, coverage for hospitals and physician costs due to COVID-19, whether there is a travel advisory in effect or not. There's even additional things like $100 per day for if you're quarantining at your destination outside of hospitals. So, for 14 days, if you're quarantining, you get $100 per day. It's a nice little extra amount to help you with the costs for quarantining. $500 for perishable goods, so such as groceries and restaurant orders delivered during your quarantine. $100 for taxis to and from a COVID-19 testing center. If you test positive for COVID-19, you're going to have to go back and get more tests to make sure that you're cleared before you go home. And so the taxis would be covered. And then they're also offering access to virtual consultations with a physician if you're going to the US. So those are some great benefits. Also, if you were to test positive for COVID-19 just before your policy is up, then you get an automatic extension of coverage without any premium payment for 14 days plus 3 days to get home. So, you know, that will cover you for, you know, you don't have to worry about extending your policy and paying the premium for that because they're going to automatically extend it. So another neat little perk there. So that is definitely the Cadillac version of policies for sure. So again, what would you have coverage for if you purchased a policy like this? Basically anything that's medically necessary, that's deemed medically necessary by the doctor that's treating you. So doctor visits, hospital stays, ICUs, ventilators, anything that you need to have, you know, for the treatment of your condition would be covered. And again, you know, specific scenarios are just super hard to answer because we've never seen anything like this before. We don't have the answers from past experience because this is just so new and so different than anything else that's been out there before. Which brings me to this slide. we miss precedent at times when we knew the answers to these things and had all the answers for our clients for the most part. Okay, so am I eligible for this type of coverage? How do I qualify? So different companies have different eligibility and rating criteria. So basically what we find is that the higher the benefits are, the harder it is to qualify. Now, that said, it doesn't necessarily mean that most people won't qualify, but there is a bit of a process to finding out if you qualify. There's lots of different questions that you have to answer. One of them being your height and your weight is a factor. Where you're going is a factor. So this is called upfront underwriting. So you have all the regular questions about, you know, if you're treated for a heart problem or a lung problem, diabetes, stroke, that type of thing. But then there's also additional questions about, you know, your destination, your height and your weight. If you're taking immunosuppressive medications, if you're taking corticosteroids. So these things are all factors when it comes to COVID, apparently, and the insurance companies are using them to determine what your pricing will be based on those criteria. So that is called upfront underwriting because those are questions that you're going to be asked up front when you get a quote or when you buy your policy. And then there's back-end underwriting. So this is referring to questions at the time of a claim. So one of the questions that we're seeing at the time of a claim is this question: was there a quarantine requirement imposed at your destination? So if you went somewhere that required you to quarantine for the first 14 days of your trip there, then any condition that, well, I'm going to read it, the actual exclusion in a moment so that we can help you understand that. But there are some websites that have been created to basically show you, you know, which states require quarantine and which don't, and even different countries around the world. So it's all kind of on the internet for you to find. So here is the quarantine exclusion that we have seen in some policies. So benefits are not payable under this policy if losses sustained or expenses incurred are the direct or indirect result of any of the following. For any eligible expenses incurred as a result of sickness while under a mandatory or suggested quarantine upon arrival. This exclusion applies if the expenses are directly or indirectly related to the reason for the quarantine. So obviously the reason for the quarantine is COVID-19. So if you're going to, I'm not sure where has this type of thing right now exactly, but if you look online, if you're thinking of going to Brazil or someplace that's not quite so mainstream in terms of snowbird destinations, then it could be that these places have some quarantine requirements, and if they do, and you've purchased this a policy that has this exclusion, then you could be not covered if you get COVID in the first 14 days. So not every policy again has this exclusion. You just have to. It's something for you to watch for when you're purchasing a policy. So things to remember. So rules are changing very rapidly. Some prices are changing based on the incident rate at your destination. So, if you're going to a hotspot in the US, for instance, and you get a quote one day, it might not be the same price as if you come back and pay for that quote a week later, because of the fact that the insurance companies are taking into consideration the incident rate at your destination. So good to, if you're getting a quote, find out if that's a factor. And just a final word about trip cancellation insurance. So trip cancellation insurance is not going to cover you for COVID-19. All of the insurance companies consider this a known risk at this time, and they will not provide coverage for trips booked in the future. So, if you're thinking, well, you know what, I'd like to book a trip and I'll just book trip cancellation insurance in order to cover my investment there, that's not going to help you for anything related to COVID. That said, also, most airlines are offering like free changes and free cancellation just to incentivize people to travel, which is something that in the past was never done, but things have changed. So you probably don't need trip cancellation insurance. Now, if you got a credit from a travel supplier in March, then you should be able to rebook your trip cancellation on your new trip in the future if you had trip cancellation on the trip and that you got a credit for. So you'd have to contact the company that you bought the trip cancellation insurance on. If you got your money back for the trip cancellation insurance, well, then you're not going to get another policy. But just in case, if you didn't get your money back for that, you might be able to use that trip cancellation policy for a trip in the future. Okay, so here we are at the question section. So we've taken some questions already, but Pam, I'm going to pass it over to you and see if there's any other questions, or if you guys want to quickly type in some new questions that you have, we'd love to answer your questions.
All right, Kathy asked earlier, she wanted to know about medical exclusions for things such as asthma. Kathy, that would be considered a pre-existing condition, and the standard exclusions are applying. So depending on which policy you purchase, as long as that medical condition has remained stable for the set number of days prior to your departure date, then that condition would be covered. If, however, you had a recent change, either in medication, the type, the dosage, starting a new medication or stopping a medication, or if you've had to go to the hospital because you had an asthma attack and that was within that time frame, then that wouldn't be covered. If you are looking for a quote, or if you already have a policy and something has happened and you're not sure, definitely give us a call. Let us know what's going on. We have policies that have exclusions for time periods as short as 7 days. So we can always look and see if you qualify for that policy and see if it's worth purchasing that coverage for you. Do policies for under 60-year-olds that have no questionnaire still exist, or do you have to get a questionnaire policy for good coverage? When you are under the age of 60, there is still usually a questionnaire or application form. Basically, you're answering the eligibility questions. Insurance companies still want to know, even though you're under 60, that you meet their eligibility requirements. And by filling in that application form, that is what you're confirming. So it's usually much shorter for somebody who's under 60, but it is still there. Cliff would like to know, can we cancel our annual policy and get a refund? Cliff, once an annual plan is already in effect, you are not eligible to cancel that policy for a refund. Single trip policies and the top up portions can be canceled for a refund, either if you don't use them or if you come home early. With annual plans, unless you can prove that you've never traveled on that policy and that it was extenuating circumstances that prevented you from canceling prior to its start date, there's very little the insurance company will do. Once that policy has been started, there's no refund available. Mary would like to know if we're aware of any companies shipping vehicles out of Calgary or Vancouver. The news stories all seem to be out of Toronto.
Yeah, so we have heard of companies that are shipping out of the West, even though the news articles seem to be out of the East. So if you're interested in getting some information on that, I can give you website addresses and phone numbers. That's pretty much all we know about it. But I'd be happy to send that to you, and you'll be able to let us know that you'd like that when we send you the feedback form for the webinar. You can let us know, and we'll send you some information on that.
Cliff wants to know if they can add COVID coverage to their annual plan.
You want to take that one, Pam, or you want me to take that one?
You go ahead, Laurie.
Okay. Well, we just found out from one of our suppliers that they are going to be offering like a COVID add-on, for existing plans. And we have one company that offers that at the moment. Their prices are a little bit on the expensive side. We'll see what this new company is offering as well. So it is possible that you can add it to an annual plan, but we'd need to kind of have more details on what annual plan that you have. On the issue of these annual plans that you can't cancel, we've been providing feedback to our insurance companies on that topic. Like this has gone on now for quite a few months, and what we saw on the whole offering COVID coverage is that for a while no one did anything. All the insurance companies were very quiet. They didn't offer anything, and then all of a sudden one insurance company offers something, and then they all kind of jump off the cliff. They kind of all start to offer something as soon as one does it. So back in, I don't know, April or something like that, Manulife offered a complimentary 3-month extension to their annual plan. So if you had an annual plan that you couldn't use, they were offering a 3-month extension on their plan, so that you would have a chance to use it. Now, 3 months at the time seemed very generous and very, like all the way into the summer. Wow, but now in hindsight, and the travel advisory has persisted longer than anyone expected. It doesn't look like that much anymore, but you never know. They might do something else. And once one company does something, then they tend to all follow suit. So, on that topic, don't throw away your paperwork yet on your annual plan, because you just never know. I mean, I don't have any inside details on this at all, but just knowing what I know about how insurance companies work, if if some company comes up with something and offers it, then they may all offer something. So don't throw away your paperwork quite yet.
Mary wants to know if COVID is a separate policy from a general medical plan, or are they an integrated policy? So do you have two different policies, or one? Mary, we have both. We have both. If you had a current annual plan that still allowed you to travel but wouldn't cover you just for the COVID, we could get a policy that covers you for COVID only. Otherwise, if you don't have that type of coverage, and you are taking a trip, we can get you an integrated policy that contains not only the regular emergency medical coverage, but the coverage that includes COVID as well. Oh, Kathy asks an interesting question, Laurie. She wants to know if we have an approximate estimation for medical costs for an ICU stay, or what the medevac cost is back to Canada.
Wow, this COVID thing is so unusual because, some people get a cold basically, and other people are, fighting for their life, and losing their life, in the hospital, in the ICU unit. So it's really hard to know what it might cost, just given that the treatments go right from one end of the spectrum to the other. But I can tell you that if you were to be in the hospital, in the ICU unit for a couple of weeks, I mean, that could be very, very expensive. Like I would say, a couple of weeks could take you higher than $500,000 US if you were, that unlucky to have that happen. And again, who knows, what the stories are, which are inflated stories and which aren't. But I've heard of people being on ventilators for weeks and weeks, and in the ICU for months and months. Like, it's just so hard to know.
Cameron asks if we're aware of any coverage that includes medevac back to Canada if you contract COVID. Cameron, every policy has benefits listed right in the policy, and most travel medical policies include land ambulance and air ambulance. And as soon as you are medically fit and able to travel, the insurance company is going to medevac you back to Canada, because the sooner you're back in Canada, the sooner they have to stop paying your bills. Now, they won't do that if it's in any way detrimental to your health, and that decision is made between the doctors down where you're receiving care and the insurance company. They also make sure that there is a bed here waiting for you, so that you're not, on the airplane tarmac waiting to try and find a bed. So all of the policies that we're looking at do include transportation and medical evacuation back to Canada.
Yeah, if it's medically necessary, that's the
If
thing.
it's medically,
If it's
yes,
medically necessary, then they are going to do it. If it's not medically, like they're not going to fly you back to Canada if you sprain your ankle. That's obviously going to cost them more than just treating you where you are. But yeah, it's all about what's medically necessary to treat your condition.
Cheryl would like to know what effect the COVID vaccine will have on insurance.
Hmm. Yeah, like the COVID vaccine, technically it's not covered under travel insurance policies because travel insurance covers emergencies. If you want to get the vaccine, you can probably get that and pay for it yourself. Other than that, I don't think that the vaccine itself is necessarily covered. But if you're in the US for 6 months, who knows what the insurance company might do. Maybe them paying your vaccination is cheaper than the risk of you getting COVID. Who knows? Again, unprecedented times.
Exactly. Jan asks, if you contract COVID near the end of your vacation but do not require hospitalization, Do you cover the cost of quarantine as required by the doctor or government? Jan, that was exactly the difference between buying the Hyundai or bare bones type policy and the Cadillac version. It all depends on the insurance policy that you've purchased and what that insurance company has added into their policy for COVID benefits. We do have one that specifically states if you test positive for COVID and you are required to quarantine but not required to be hospitalized, they will provide for up to 14 days some benefits, and those benefits include some living expenses, um, money for perishable food items, either groceries or takeout food orders, taxi fares to and from a COVID testing site, and if you are in the US, a virtual visit with a physician to give you that medical response that you need. Again, it depends on the policy. That policy, if you do get it at the end of your stay, it will automatically extend for up to the 14 days to provide you coverage for that quarantine period. And then once that 14 days is over, an additional 3 days or 72 hours to give you time to travel home. You're
Great
welcome.
questions.
Yes.
Keep them coming, guys. Are there any more, Pam?
No,
I think that might
that's
be the
it
end
so
of them.
far. I think we've touched base on everybody.
Okay, so we're going to be sending you a feedback form to provide us with feedback on our webinar today. And if you are looking for information on car shipping or a quote for travel medical insurance, you'll be prompted on there to let us know about that so that you can get some information from us on that. And if we can help you, I've listed our phone number there. You can go online to get a quote if you'd like. You can go to our website. There's more information. So we appreciate you again joining us today, and thank you for all your great questions. And thank you so much.